Hi again, everybody. I wanted to talk some more about arguments of proposal and the different things that are involved in an argument of proposal, because each of you need to be thinking about, how are you going to fill up the space of your essay, which is a longer essay than we've written before, with content. So we've got a claim here. This is one of your classmates' claims. The Electoral College is out of date and needs to be abolished completely to ensure a fair election process. Okay, so remember, argument and proposal names a problem and a solution to that problem. So presumably, here is the implicit statement of the problem. This writer implies that the current election process is unfair. Okay. And the solution is that the Electoral College needs to be abolished. All right. Now, in the last video, I talked about how the bulk of this essay, the main part of this essay, will need to be an explanation of what should be the system that replaces the Electoral College. But that's not the only detail here. So let's start with the problem, because the essay needs to discuss the problem in its own right. So, if the problem is unfair elections, there are certain questions that this person is going to need to respond to in their essay. So, let me write some of them down. For one, what is the Electoral College? How does it work? Also, what is the history of the Electoral College? When did it start? How was it founded, in other words? What was the reasoning for using an Electoral College? Presumably, the people who founded American democracy made the system that they did for very particular reasons. They didn't just sort of do it, by the seat of their pants. There are specific reasons that they made these things. And so I think in order to show an audience that you're informed on this topic, you need to say, why did they set up an Electoral College to begin with? Okay? So this all so far is just sort of talking about the problem and its history, right? But next, we need to answer what U.S. elections were unfair. Specifically presidential elections. Which U.S. presidential elections were unfair? And further, how was the unfairness caused by the Electoral College? All right, so let me talk about this for a minute. One of the interesting things is that we really didn't have that much pressure in America to get rid of the Electoral College for a good, 200 years of our history. For 200 years of our history, nobody saw the Electoral College as a big problem. When did it start being a big problem? Well, I'll tell you when. It started being a big problem when George W. Bush beat Al Gore in 2000, and he had a minority of the popular vote. In other words, Al Gore had more votes than Bush, but Bush won because of the Electoral College. Okay, and that was when we first started hearing, we need to do away with the Electoral College, right? And then Barack Obama was elected, and everything was fine, or so it seemed, because nobody complained about the Electoral College anymore. And then Donald Trump was elected, again, with a minority of the popular vote. He won less votes, or fewer votes, than Hillary Clinton. But he did win in the Electoral College. And so now, once again, everybody's like, oh my gosh, we need to get rid of the Electoral College. Well, so there's really two times in modern history where people have claimed that the elections were unfair, right? And interestingly, in both cases, it was a Democrat who won the popular vote but lost the election. And so, first of all, you'll notice that it's mostly Democrats who are saying that the Electoral College is unfair and needs to be replaced. Why are they mad about it? Well, because it's caused them to lose elections, right? But that's the way the system was set up, right? We're playing by the rules. And so in that sense, it's an open question as to whether or not those elections were unfair, right? If those are the rules and we're playing by the rules, it's not unfair, unless you're arguing that the rules themselves are unfair. Now, that's a dicier question, in part because, right, and I talked about this a little bit in the last video, the Electoral College was put into place to make sure that the urban states, states with a lot of big cities, don't have more power than the majority of states with lesser populations. So what the Electoral College was an attempt to balance the needs of urban states with those of rural states. And so they always recognized that there was a hypothetical possibility that somebody could win the popular vote, the highest vote total, and lose the election in the Electoral College. Now, just for those reasons doesn't mean it's not unfair. You could still say it's unfair. But if you're going to say it's unfair, you can't just say, oh, it's unfair because Trump won and Bush won, and they shouldn't have, right? You have to get to the heart of the matter. Why is it unfair, right, that we have that we balance the power of the urban states with those of the rural states, right? So why is it unfair that California, New York, Florida, and Texas don't just get to pick who's the president, right? Because that's what the Electoral College was meant to do. So these are all aspects of the problem so far. Now, Now let's talk about the solutions, right? So really, you need to talk about what is the alternative to the Electoral College? Now, I think that traditionally it's been thought that in order to get rid of the Electoral College, we would need to pass a constitutional amendment, which is a big deal. But if you do a little bit of research on this topic, you'll find that recently, I think it's called the Interstate Election Pact or something like that. There are some states that are trying to effectively do away with the Electoral College by getting around a constitutional amendment. But this writer will need to be specific about what's the alternative to the Electoral College. How would it work? Would this change require a constitutional amendment? If not, how would it be achieved? Okay. Now, further, so really, the biggest part of the essay is right here, right? This should be the main event of the essay that most of the essay is dedicated towards explaining. This is the proposal, really. This is what we should do instead of the Electoral College and explaining how it would work. But we'd also need to say, how is this new system superior in terms of fairness when compared to the Electoral College? Okay. And further, we would need to explain, how is this new system superior to other possible proposals, to other possible alternatives to the Electoral College? So surely, there are other ways that we could elect a president than the way that this person is arguing for. So how is the new system superior to some of those other possible ways that maybe we haven't discussed? And so, this is, at least here in the question of fairness, you're going to need to say, so let's imagine a scenario where a presidential candidate is very, very popular in the states of New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and California, right? And those states tend to vote for the same candidate, right? They tend to vote for the same candidate. That is the Democratic candidate. It's conceivable that candidate who just was very, very popular in 5 or 10 large states wins the overall election, whereas in the other 40 states in America, that candidate who won the popular vote is very unpopular. So I'm asking you, why is it fairer that 5 or 10 states out of 50 should get to pick, when perhaps the majority of states think that actually this candidate that those states prefer is inferior? So these are some of the things that you'd need to talk about. Why I did this video is because you need to look at your claim and ask yourself, what do I need to tell people about the problem? Oh, this is another thing, right? We didn't even say that, right? We should say this. What are the negative effects let me say this. Other than unfair elections that come from the Electoral College, right? The reason you would do this is maybe people aren't convinced that the Electoral College has made unfair elections. And so for those people, you're going to need to explain what are some other negative effects that come from this, right? And I can think of a few. So, but the point is, you're going to have to detail what needs to be explained about the problem itself, and that's here, right? What needs to be explained about the solution, and that's all here, right? And from answering these questions, you can probably imagine an overall structure to this essay. So if you have any questions about this, let me know. I encourage you to do this with your claim as you're planning your essay and figuring out what you need to research, because for these questions that you are unable to answer, that's really where you need to direct your research from. So I hope you have a good weekend. Bye-bye.